90 days is it really, you want to look at your local regulations to figure out what is considered short-term versus long-term. Some days it's 30, some days it's a week. You just want to be very informed about what that specific difference is, so that you have the right management style. And as most of you, if you're experienced long-term rental, you're more familiar with it being unfurnished, having a 6-month plus lease, getting a deposit, doing background and credit checks, really screening your tenants well. And you don't do a lot of that with short-term rental. So it's important to understand where legally that timeline break is for the location that you have a property in. If you're going through one of the big OTAs, then they're going to, like Airbnb or VRBO, they're going to have their own rules and their own process for a lot of this. So it will vary depending on the partnership that you're getting your guests through, or you can have direct bookings as well. But any of those will have some type of rental agreement. There can be a smaller deposit. Airbnb says they have a deposit, but they don't actually really collect one. So that's something that a lot of new Airbnb listing owners don't realize. Is they say, okay, I have a $300 deposit, but it's never actually collected. So that's something to be aware of. But those are the big differences, and we'll dive into it a bit more. So I like to be positive, so I start with the good. One of the really great things as an owner is that you really have very minor wear and tear. Depending on your location, guests often won't even use the kitchen. And if they do, it might be once or twice. So they're going out to eat. They're exploring the area. They're out during the day. They might be fixing breakfast and then not use it for the rest of the day. So your kitchen tends to fare very well in this. You do get a fair amount. You want to stay really, really clean. And you'll hear me say this several times because I cannot stress cleanliness enough. It's a huge difference for a lot of people who are used to traditional landlord. You need to be spotless. Think about paying a premium to stay in the nicest hotel you've ever chosen. That's what your house needs to look like every single check-in. So you should expect your carpet and your upholstery to be steam cleaned frequently. You do not ever want it, like even my house is not as clean as my rental, so it really has to be that 100% all the time. A dish will get chipped, some silverware might get misplaced, and occasionally, and mostly if you don't buy good quality furniture, you'll have furniture damage. Most of the furniture damage that I hear of is from hosts who buy cheap or thrift or yard sale for their beds and their sofas, their chairs. I buy commercial, or at least 400 pounds for a chair. So, not that my guests are that large, they probably couldn't even fit in the chair at that weight. However, people do stupid things when they're on vacation. They might be standing on it. They might jump on it, things you don't do to your own furniture. So you really want it to be that next level of quality, and it's really not that much more expensive versus a new item otherwise. So just be of the mind that those are places you want to put your money, is in commercial grade weight bearing furniture, because otherwise you're going to end up replacing it and probably get a bad guest review in the process. So it's not worth it. I may have skipped something. Yeah, so I think the big thing is that leaks, carpet wear, pests, major damage, you just don't really see that stuff. And you have at least a cleaning crew in there a couple times a week, usually, or weekly. Weekly is my minimum. So even if I have someone booked for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I require weekly cleaning. I want someone that I trust in there once a week, seeing how things are being treated. Oh, there goes the siren. Sorry about that. But to change out linens, to get them washed. I don't want relying on guests to wash their linens. I have a washer and dryer still. I buy decent quality linens, and I use white for everything. So having someone come in once a week will keep your linens in good shape. People are a little bit more responsible when they know someone's going to be coming in regularly. So I think it actually curbs behavior a bit. And it also allows you to catch something if they're doing something they're not supposed to. So it's in 1 weekend, you're going to get a conversation going to say, hey, I know the rules say no smoking, but we're getting this sense that you're smoking inside. You're going to have to do that outside, or whatever it is. instead of it being 2 or 3 weeks, where at that you have to take a day off that you can't book because it's going to take all day to turn your property back over to the condition it should be. So that's one of those things that's a hard rule for me. I don't do more than a week with one guest without having a cleaning in there. So the wear and tear is very minimal. As I showed you with the potato, small spaces are okay, and often they can be great because you don't need a lot of storage space. A lot of times people will pull a closet out and use it as additional storage or a sitting area, because really all you need is a couple of drawers and a little bit of hanging space. And you could do that on a wall. It just depends on how the space is laid out to what that looks like. But the experience is what matters. And again, that's why I led with the potato, because it's the most bizarre thing to me, but it's very popular. And it's all about the experience. And this is how you stand out. That potato was in the middle of nowhere in Idaho. They're not coming there to go to town to see the attractions or anything else. It's specifically to have that farm experience. So you can look at spaces that wouldn't be great options for tenants, or maybe that the return, the rent that income from a LTR wouldn't be enough to pay for it. But when you look at it in a different lens and you say, okay, but this is walking distance to this thing that is really going to attract tourists, or to a hospital where there's a lot of people coming for surgeries and families would stay there. So there are different things you can look at where the experience will actually be more valuable than just the basic bedrooms and bathrooms and layout. And your amenities mostly are things that you can add. So a coffee bar can fit just about anywhere, and it is huge. People love it. I have like a combo espresso cappuccino coffee drip machine. It cost me like $150 on Black Friday. This is the best time of year to stock your STR with all the things, because everything's on sale. And I get comments about it constantly. So it was a one-time investment, and it is really a hit, and it's really easy from an investment perspective. It was very small. Character, again, figure out what your design style is. The potato has a definite like boho and a little bit of mid-century modern. And so there are a couple of types: boho, modern, mid-century. Those three actually tend to do very well from a design aesthetic. It just depends on which one works for you and your space. And some of it, if you're going to use it, it may be your style too. But those are the things that really drive bookings in the experience. And like I said, they don't need full-size living. They're going to have a suitcase or two. They're going to be there maybe a couple of weeks, probably a weekend or a week. So very small spaces work really well. And you can have a real opportunity with something that doesn't make sense for LTR. Tiny houses have a huge following now, and that's more of an experiential thing, where someone would want to stay in one for a weekend, but they're not convinced they can downsize from their 2,500 square foot house to a tiny house permanently. So people, it really is, they make a lot of money. It's really surprising how well some of these alternate spaces do. So don't let something small fall off your radar as a potential purchase. Just look at it a little differently. Tenancy, which is probably more of a hot button right now than it has been in the past. And again, this is why I said to know like your timeline for your local area. But innkeeper laws are what hotels use to kick people out when they don't pay or they're trouble, what have you. And they often apply to short-term rental as long as you're within the same guidelines. And you can evict guests for just being disorderly, for breaking the house rules. If they don't vacate on time, and in the bookings through Airbnb, they allow you to charge double the nightly rate for each day someone overstays. So fine, stay over and pay me twice what you paid me for last week. So it's a much different experience than having to try to go through a real eviction. So that one can be a nice experience for a landlord who's had to do traditional evictions. The money, it's what you really care about, right? So I have a unit, and a neighbor of mine has a traditional tenant in one of her units. They're virtually identical, except for the backyard I have is a bit more spacious. So I asked her for her numbers, and this is an sorry? Oh. So this is an actual apples to apples comparison of 2 units in Colorado Springs. And my numbers under STR are actually a little low. I did this about a month and a half ago. I just updated them, and I should make another 5,000 on top of what this says. So based on based on conservative estimates for the rest of the year. So it's substantial. Higher net profit. And as I said earlier, amenities are a good way to differentiate yourself. The finishes that you choose will drive your nightly rate. Also, you get to react to the market. So we saw a big dip in the spring as COVID really came out and there were lockdowns and things. But as soon as things kind of settled in, we are seeing record high rates right now. So the highest rates we've ever seen. And that's true of many drive-to locations around the country right now. So anywhere that's got space, outdoor activities, places where you could vacation and still social distance, beaches, are seeing banner years. Urban markets, not so much. So that is something to consider. The last one is your personal use. So mine is in Colorado, and I am looking at maybe Vietnam for my next one. So we love to use our properties, and you can or you can't if that's just one of those extra really great bonuses about it. As your vacation home, if you have family and friends, my cousin owns a beach house. I own one in Colorado. We trade houses, so I get the beach house as a bonus instead if I want to go to the beach. So it can really give you some nice perks in addition to the income and the protecting your investment. All right, so the downsides. It tends to cost you more upfront because you have to furnish. Furniture, which I mentioned, linens, I mentioned, kitchenware, small appliances I touched on, outdoor patio, barbecue, your smart home. You're going to want to put in Ring cameras outside. You're going to want a smart thermostat. There are certain things that you just really want to put the money into up front, so your upfront investment is going to be more expensive. Your insurance is going to be more expensive for short-term rental. You're going to be paying utilities and trash, and then consumables like we provide coffee and tea, sweetener, cooking oils. We even give them snacks. And I have gone as far, and you don't have to do this, but I've gone as far as to have a scavenger hunt that they can come across in my unit, and they'll learn more about Colorado wildlife as they go through the scavenger hunt. And then there are prizes in the last piece of it that they find. So that is another consumable that I fund. But I build all of that into my cleaning costs, which is a per stay cost. So there are ways to manage it. Just these are the things you should be aware of. It takes more time. I highly recommend working with a property manager if you've never done short-term rental before, at least for the first year or two, to really learn what's normal, because things are going to make you angry at times. Reviews are very important, and you don't really want to have to restart your listing if you make a bunch of mistakes up front and get a bunch of low scores, because you really can't ever recover from a lot of low scores. So you really want to be performing at a high level right out of the gate. It'll give you a lot of advantages. You can always decide later you want to try self-managing and pull back that ownership. But I see most investors decide that the money that they're going to pay a manager is not worth it, and they make a lot of mistakes, and then they're trying to do damage control later. So that's I'm not a manager. I don't manage properties. I pay a manager, but that's my perspective.
So do you pay a local manager on site where all of your properties are, or do you use a nationwide company?
I highly prefer a local manager, because if they're not local, then I could probably do exactly what they're doing. But a local manager shows up at my property to put the garage door back together when the tenant or the guest who doesn't know how a garage door opener works unlinks the door and can't get out of the garage. and my manager's there in 15 minutes so that they can go on with their day and go do their sightseeing. That's not something I could do. And that's not something that really most national managers could do. There tends to be at least a couple of hours in most of their comm responses and their reaction time. And those are critical moments. Plus, I like having somebody local. I mean, we have problems here and there all the time. I had a fuse blow yesterday and the guest couldn't figure it out, but my manager was like, just let me know if I need to stop by and we'll flip the breaker for you. Those are going to be harder conversations for a national manager.
Jill Lycan is asking, what kind of local manager do you have? Like, do you look for an apartment property manager? Are you looking for somebody specific that manages short-term rentals?
Absolutely specific to short-term rental. Your regular property manager will not have the systems in place. Cleaners, for example, are like, even if you don't use a property manager, your cleaner is going to be the most important person on your team. They're more important than you are, really, to the guest. And so if you use a regular long-term property manager, they're not going to have cleaners that clean to hospitality standards. They're going to have move in, move out turnover cleaners. It's a different standard. When my cleaners go through, they tell me if a soap dispenser isn't working properly. They tell me what my refill stock needs are. They leave the fireplace on and the music playing for the guests to check in. It is a much different standard. I know a couple of people who own the actual cleaning company in addition to doing property management, and some of them don't even call them cleaners, they call them hospitality experts because the bar is so much higher. And the pay, honestly, the average STR cleaner makes $20 to $25 an hour. So, and you expect a certain level of professionalism for paying essentially double what they would make at a hotel. So it's very different. So yes, you want someone specialized in short-term rental.
Getting a lot of questions about, so I don't know if it's okay to ask you as you go along.
Yeah.
No.
Sure.
So Jill was asking how and where do you find them? And then Karen wanted to know if the property management fees are higher for STR. She's heard it's 20% when typically from a long-term rental perspective, it's 10%.
Yeah, that's about right. So in this slide, I'll just back up for a second. So these numbers are actually net after we both use professional full service property management. So she uses a long-term manager, I use a short-term manager. So, and again, I'll make another 5 on top of this. So I should be closer to 31 by the end of the year and net. My gross this year, if you include cleaning costs and my property management, I should gross about $57,000 this year on a 2-bedroom. So it definitely is more expensive to use a property manager in short-term rental, but if you get a good one, they earn their rate. So I have worked with 3 different property managers over the last 3 years because I am admittedly a bit of a perfectionist. And I knew we could get to the numbers I wanted to get to, and the managers I was working with weren't doing it. So I've seen incremental, and I mean like 20 to 25% increases every time I change. And so if you're talking about a 20 to 25% commission, if we bump up 20%, then they're paying for themselves, and they're actually, so it really, the good part of a good local manager is the key. And I'm happy to help you. One of the things that I do is actually interview managers for clients in their local area to figure out what you have available to you and who's your best option. So that is something that I'm happy to do if it's something that you're interested in. Oh, where was I? Time, yeah. So if you want to do it yourself, you just need to be aware that there is a lot of time that goes into setting this stuff up and doing it really well. Getting yourself on the first couple of pages of search results in Airbnb, it doesn't just happen. It takes time, and every week it takes time. Guest communications, handling issues, that's typically the most time intensive after managing cleaners. because every time you get an inquiry, you need to respond and quickly and be like your best hospitality, friendly, and professionalism. I mean, it requires a certain skill set to do this well. The cleaning schedule, if you're generating excess trash, linens don't always come back in great condition, so it may be excess cleaning. I know some owners like to try and do their cleaning themselves because, again, they see that as a way to make more money, and technically it is, but you have to value your time, and this can be very time intensive if you don't have a good system in place. Platform management, Airbnb, VRBO, you'll have different platforms that you may list on. If you have issues where you have to file a claim, that can take months and hours of your time. So those are all things to be aware of. Routine inspections and maintenance. We have a monthly process. I want, in addition to my cleaners that are there multiple times a week, I want another set of eyes, my manager or one of the other staff that are in management, walking through the property once a month to inspect it and make sure everything's working as expected, everything is refilled, we're not seeing any damage. So again, back to the investment protection, lots of eyes on your property, making sure you're protected. And I already kind of touched on damage claims. Guests do stupid things. They throw parties, they sneak in dogs. I mean, some of the same stuff your tenants would do. But the difference is that, especially with Airbnb, you have a host guarantee where you can actually submit claims to Airbnb instead of just to your insurance. So you have double layers of protection, and that will take some time to manage, but then you get reimbursed for a new rug or a new countertop or excess cleaning costs. So that is one of the great things about it, but it does take time again. And the last thing, as I'm sure you're probably aware, short-term rentals are not always thought of fondly, especially in traditional neighborhoods. And it is in your best interest to be very friendly and to be your neighbor's favorite community member, not the worst. HOA restrictions, city restrictions, other issues, all typically stem from people who aren't managing their neighborhood very well. You want to be the best neighbor, not the worst. So that's, again, something that can be different. It's not as hands-off as LTR. So another thing, as I mentioned, guests may have parties. Guest screening is really very minimal. And so this is very different than tenant experience. Basically, if you have an email address, you can set up an account. No picture, no identity verification. And the one on the left, Norma, is actually a friend of mine who rented my unit. And so I knew her, but she was able to submit a rental through Airbnb with just that amount of information. So you really want to pay attention to nuance on what people are saying, look at their previous reviews. As you can see, she has one now, and that's mine. But Terry here had two. And so you can see how they were as guests at previous areas. You want to do more than what Airbnb is. They're not vetted guests. Don't assume that just because they have an account that they're going to be a good guest. These are all stories, you know, about issues that come up from guests doing stuff they're not supposed to. As a matter of fact, Airbnb just instituted this year that Halloween, you could not do a single night booking. It had to be at least 2 nights to try and minimize the parties that were happening over Halloween. And they're running it as a test. If this is successful and they like the results, they may roll this policy out to other party-prone holidays. So you may see this for New Year's and 4th of July, Memorial Day, and what have you, where you have to book for at least 2 days or more, maybe. They may even adjust it upwards to try and minimize this party issue because it gets them a lot of bad press. So let's say you get through the stay and the guest leaves a review and it's lies or it's awful. And this is why I was saying the property manager could really add value because you'll likely minimize how much of this happens. The guest review process lacks a lot of oversight. Airbnb will remove reviews that violate their policies, but they're pretty lax about it, and they're not really great. They explicitly allow untrue reviews. They will not It doesn't matter what kind of documentation you provide. So they could say you're next to the dump and you could provide aerial video and it wouldn't matter. So just be aware that managing your guests really, really well up front will pay off in the review. And the reason that matters is you really don't want to fall below like 4.6, 4.7, and it happens really fast. So because the 4-star review, it goes to the 100th place. If you get one 4-star review, you'll need 200 5-star reviews to get back to 5 stars. So it virtually is unattainable. So just be aware of that up front, the Airbnb's review system is very difficult to be perfect in. And with that said, as long as you're above a 4.7, I think you're okay. Because that's where you would lose Superhost status, which has other benefits. Guests aren't quite as hypercritical about you being a perfect 5, I think, as some hosts are about it. So as long as you keep your Superhost benefits, I think that's a good metric for long-term success. The other major thing, and I kind of touched on this with the neighborhood, is regulations are changing all the time, and even legislatively, STR is not always favored. So in Florida, the governor shut down vacation rentals, but he left hotels open. So I don't know the math there. This pandemic, when people could go to a private house versus a hotel, there's not a lot of logic there. It seems mostly prejudicial. And often we suspect driven by hotel lobbying. So something else that can be a challenge. Denver, Asheville, I know of a host right now that's dealing with an issue in Charleston. She didn't realize that her commercial building still needed, a mixed use building needed STR permitting. She didn't have it. She's been fined $1,000 per night, and plus she has to go to court to see if she's going to be required to spend 90 days in jail. So very important that you know your regulations and you follow them. All right, so industry stuff. COVID had a lot more impact on hotel comparables. So condo buildings that were kind of uniformly decorated, Stay Alfred, Lyric, Sonder, they're all big operators in the short-term rental space in that way. Stay Alfred and Lyric both pretty much shut down. Sonder they did downsize, but they started marketing to college students, work from home, relocating families, medical workers, people escaping COVID hotspots. So they were agile and thoughtful enough to understand that they needed to adapt, and they actually were able to survive because of that change. So that's something else to be aware of. Is that, you know, you're much more subject to market conditions, and you need to be paying attention when things start to look, and this is rare, you know, we're talking about a pandemic, this is not normal, but to be ahead of the curve, I put someone in for 60 days, you know, a contractor. And so all spring from mid-April to mid-June, I had someone in my property paying a premium well above what LTR rates were, but not anywhere near my normal income. But when Colorado shut down short-term rentals for 30 days, I didn't care because I had somebody in there. And then when things started to open back up and settle down in the summer, he moved out and I went right back to it. So having that agility and paying attention will really protect you and pay off. So this looks at short-term rental pricing. So weekly RevPAR is per available rental or room, is the hotel terminology. So you can see that the top line, the orange line, is 2-bedroom plus. And the green line, greenish blue, is hotels. And the beginning of the year, they were pretty close to each other. And now, and this is just June, I would expect that this disparate is even probably the same or very close to this now. Hotels have kept really low prices to keep their occupancy up. They've really discounted in a way that I've never seen before. So the hotel room at the end of June was $41, and STRs were over 200. So, you know, 5 times, more than 5 times as much. And that speaks to the agility of the market, is that you can look at different target guests. People are always moving around. They're buying a house. Their house gets damaged and insurance is paying for it. You know, they're moving to the area. They're working in the area. Nurses have short-term contracts. There's so many different people that need furnished homes for short amounts of time. You just need to be creative about what makes sense in your market. Airbnb is going to IPO anytime now. So in August, they filed with the SEC, and they've continually been rolling out policies and procedures to, I think, get them a bit more professional. So Brian Chesky is one of the founders of Airbnb, and it was like a couple of guys that started literally renting out an air mattress in their house. So not really high-end professionals, and you could definitely tell that in the way it was run and the communications that went out. So earlier, at the beginning of this year, Catherine Powell, who used to be the president of Disney Parks, joined Airbnb, and in September, she became the head of hosting. In the last 6 to 8 weeks, I've seen more progress than I've seen in the last 3 years in how it's being managed. So they really are trying to clean house and get things up and running to make this IPO happen.
Tracy, I'm not sure, does everybody know what an IPO is?
Okay. So, gosh, I don't even know. It's a stock offering, but
initial public offering, right?
Okay.
So
they're trying to, they're going to go public. Yeah. And so you can buy stock. And I think I have something later on, but maybe not. Oh, it's in here. Yeah. So they're trying to get, I want to say, a $3 billion valuation, which will be the 3rd largest of the NASDAQ in history, behind Facebook and Mondelez, whoever that is. So it's significant. It's a big deal. That's a ton of money. And one of the things that I think will happen is that it's going to give Airbnb so much capital that they're going to take over this market in any way they can. I mean, they're going to have so much money right now when hotels are hurting and they're not, that I expect to see even more shift towards you. We're having more first-time users than I've ever seen. People are moving away from hotels, having an experience and realizing what's available, and I expect that trend to continue. So the money, the virus, and people who have never had the motivation to try it are now trying it, all will continue to propel this forward. Okay, so supply and demand is a big thing I've been talking about. Your more rural areas, outdoor adventure areas are doing, phenomenal. For example, Gatlinburg's Pigeon Forge area in Tennessee has always been really strong. There are so many investors buying in that area right now. I was in a meeting with a local realtor yesterday. She said, you should expect 20+ offers on any property that goes up for sale. You should expect to pay over ask, and you should expect to pay an appraisal gap, or you should expect to sign an appraisal gap guarantee, so that your appraisal is not even a contingency of your offer. That's how aggressive buying in there right now is. And people are still netting 20 to 30% cash on cash. So it's aggressive. But there's a couple other areas I would recommend you look at too. So just as an example of how many people are buying right now because demand is so high. AirDNA is software that you can get a good snapshot of a market. It is not gospel. Be very careful. It gives you market averages. If you do well, you should do better. If you don't know what you're doing, you will do worse. And I find that comp analysis is a better way to go if you really are trying to dial in what you should expect. I mentioned restrictions earlier, your HOA, municipal permits, You should also pay attention to what's being discussed, even if there's no legislation yet. What are they talking about? What's likely to come down in the next year? I know several people that were under contract when the Springs enacted new requirements, and they were no longer allowed to rent the property that they hadn't closed on yet because they couldn't meet the timeline for them to change. And just general friendliness to STR. That's one reason I mentioned Gatlinburg. It is almost exclusively a tourist destination. They're never going to change that. It would decimate the entire economy there. If you're looking at a more urban area, that may be different. So something else to keep in mind. Yeah, as I said, property manager options. Different property managers offer different services, have different levels of experience, and have different commission structures. And seasonality. AirDNA will give you some sense of seasonality, but the more researched you are, the more you can minimize how much seasonality affects you. And yeah, so from a preparation perspective, the location, just like in other real estate, is so important. You know, if you're competing in a rural area, you're going to have a lot of amenities to make your place the destination. If you're walkable to a local tourist attraction like I am, I don't really, I have more than most of, because I like to overachieve, but really the location is oftentimes the primary thing that someone will comment on. Beds and baths will dictate your occupancy. And if you do a market analysis, you'll want to look at what the optimal number of guests in your space are. Every market's different. Some 1-bedrooms perform amazingly. Sometimes, some areas you need a 5-bedroom to really hit crazy numbers. So it really just depends on your market and what the demand is there's not a hard and fast rule across the board.
Tracy, we did have a question about the number of people a property can accommodate. Jill asked, if you want to add more sleep space, would you recommend having a fold-out sleeper?
So I do not subscribe to the max heads in beds philosophy. I find that you usually want to do 2 people per bedroom, and then you can do +2. So for example, I have a 2-bedroom and I have a max of 5, but I used to have 6. I haven't found that it made any difference. I actually make more money now, and I may reduce it to 4. You know, but I don't target families. That's not my guest demographic for this property. So with children, a little bit more is acceptable because a few kids in a room is no big deal. But keeping in mind that if you have a bedroom set up for children, like bunk beds or twins, that you are never going to really attract adults into that room. So you really have to understand your branding and who you're really trying to hone in on as your guest to make that final decision. I do have a sleeper sofa. I don't really want people to use it. It's more difficult to turn over. It's more prone to break. It's harder to keep clean because people will often not make it up, and you can't make it up in advance, or things will slide down the cushions and get on it. Bunk beds, as I mentioned, are not ideal simply because they're a pain in the butt to make. So some of those things where you could squeeze in more people actually create a lot more logistical issues. And I don't find that you make more money that way. I find you make more money targeting a higher end guest who wants their space, who only wants to put a couple in a bedroom. People who are looking to cram 3, 4, 5 people into a room want to pay $20 a night, and they leave you bad reviews. So they pay you less and they ruin your brand. Don't do it.
And then she had another question that said, because Airbnb quotes a nightly rate, can you make the rate different if you have 2 guests versus 4 guests?
Yes. So you can set, and that's actually what we do. We set a base rate. I get a lot of couples, like just one couple that will stay in my place. So we set a base rate, and if you use dynamic software, you can have that changing, responding to demand and supply all the time. The price for my place is different every single night of the week for the rest of the year. So it's very intuitive and it changes constantly. But to answer your question, you'll set whatever the rate is, and then even in Airbnb, you can add on to say if it's an extra charge per guest over X. So mine is $10 more per guest over 2. And so then then my max is 5, so I'll make an extra $30 a night if someone wants my max occupancy.
Okay.
All right. So yeah, big things, pools, hot tubs, game rooms, those are big wow factors that are going to set you apart. Again, in the meeting I was in yesterday in Gatlinburg, she quoted, depending on the size of the property, that having a pool, which has to be indoor in their market, it will generate an extra 30 to 50 grand of revenue a year. So yeah, again, you want to look at your market and figure out what the demand is, what you need to compete, and what that ROI is going to be. But things that I would never typically consider at that return, you know, it might be on the list. And I've touched on this some. Who's your target guest? Vacationers, business, healthcare, insurance, relocations, military. It's not just tourists on vacation. There are a lot of people that need space beyond what we traditionally think of. And that a lot of times will come into play in your off season. Back to the seasonality comment. If you're really well researched, you know when your down season is, you start advertising to those other markets that won't pay as much as a prime tourist in prime season, but they pay way more than you being vacant because tourists aren't there. And then anytime that I look at a property, I look at it from an LTR perspective first. If restrictions change, you know, or if the world gets shut down for travel for 2 months, you know, you need to have a backup plan. So at least have your LTR numbers in place to where you can pay your bills. Don't put yourself upside down in a property thinking it's going to be your cash cow for tourism, just in case. Especially when you get started. You get 3, 4, 5 of these guys, those other ones can carry that one that maybe you splurged a little on. But when you get started, be conservative. Midterm stays, as I mentioned, I had a guy in there for 2 months, worked great for me. Nurses typically have 3-month contracts, travel nurses. So those are your midterm, you know, insurance. Again, if someone has a house damaged where it's not habitable, insurance will pay very high to put them in a furnished rental for months while their house is repaired. And then, you know, always looking at, you know, making your money on the buy. Make sure you've got some equity in that sucker just in case everything else isn't working out or you're just done and want to get out. So that's my spiel on protecting yourself. As I mentioned, AirDNA, you can take a look and get a sense of what a market looks like. These numbers on the left is what it's telling you I should do at my property this year. I'm going to come in close to double that. But I would confidently say I'm operating in the 90th or above percentile in my market. So my occupancy rate will be somewhere between 90 and 95% this year. So again, you know, you can use it, but don't take it as gospel because it really is very dependent on how you manage it and what you do. If you're looking to buy and you don't really care about doing something locally, this is from this year. I would look at the Poconos if I were you. Shh, don't tell. You can see Gatlinburg just below that. This report's probably a month, at least a month old, maybe 2 or 3 months old now. I would expect the cap rate to be going down in Gatlinburg because it's on so many investors' radar right now that the buying frenzy is out of control. Where the Poconos, as far as I know, are not. And it's a smaller investment. You're looking at a median price of $200,000 with a cap rate of over 8%. It's a good return. And again, these are market averages. So you should be able to outperform this if you're doing this well or working with someone who really is a good professional in their area. But I mean, you know, the number 25 is still 5% on the cap rate. So there's a lot of different places. Figure out where you want to be, where you're passionate about, where you want to visit. These can all be reasons and still find something that does very well from an investment perspective. All right, furnishing is a huge part because, again, it goes back to that potato. It's just a potato, but it was furnished beautifully and light and bright. Some of the stuff I've touched on. Comfort is huge. If I look, and this is my personal preference, but if I look at a property and it's supposed to sleep 6 and it only seats 4 in the living room, I'm not going to book it if I have a party of 6. What are is my one friend's couple friends going to sit on the floor while we hang out for the week? No. So just be mindful of use not just throwing stuff into the space. And durable, I mentioned with the weight bearing, and also your finishes. Try to pick finishes that people have a really hard time destroying. I would go with granite over quartz just because people are likely to put a hot pan on quartz and burn it. You know, don't put fancy things in a rental that require people to understand how they work. One of my clients got really enamored with kitchen, and her stove talks, and her faucet has different colors depending on the temperature. And I walked in because her and her interior designer went really crazy for a couple months while I've been locked down on Corona. And I came back and I was like, we're going to need to leave a manual on the kitchen counter so people know how to use the stuff in here. And if they don't read it, they're going to break it. So, you know, simplicity, nice, good quality, but don't go crazy with buttons and fancy features. It's more likely to hurt you than it is to help. Cleaning, the other thing. So stainless always looks higher end, and I'm a big fan of stainless, but it's also harder to clean and keep clean. And again, it needs to be spotless every single time someone checks in. So just keep that in mind when you're deciding, can you make something look nice that's easier to clean than what you're choosing? That often is the pictures that I get from the same client in Montana is, which of these should I choose? That one, it's easier to clean. And it's not going to matter to the guest which one you have. So just keep always the cleaning, because that is, after you get started, it's the cleaners that are going to be in there all the time. So I can't stress that enough. If you're picking fabrics, indoor, outdoor fabrics have come a long way in the last 10 years or so. You can get some that feel really nice, lots of great colors and patterns, and you can rinse that sucker off outside with a hose if you need to. So when things get a little out of hand, someone had too much to drink and got sick, you take your pillows outside and wash them off. You know, just little things to make your life easier, make your pieces last longer, because every time you have to replace stuff, it's more money, it's time. And if you do too many updates or replacements, your pictures are now out of date. And professional pictures, I read a study recently that a property that's occupied 60% a year, so not a high occupancy property, will see an extra 11 days of booking if they have professional photos. 11 days. So even if you're charging $50 a night, that's over what? It's almost $600. Professional photography costs you probably $200 to $300 for your average property. So it pays for itself in less than a year, and then you just make more money year after year after year. But if you keep changing stuff inside, you have to pay for more photography. So that is a cascading effect. Mattresses and pillows should be in waterproof zippered encasements, 100%. This is a basic sanitation hygiene requirement. If you don't do it, you're going to get bed bugs, you're going to get your mattress peed on, something is going to happen, and you're going to remember me telling you this. Before you have a single guest or a single sheet on your bed, encasements need to be on them. Personal touches are great. Little things to remind guests that you're really thinking of them. You don't want it to be sterile. You don't want it to be cookie cutter. That's what hotels do. You want it to be a space where they can feel comfortable and relaxed and know that someone really thought of them. I mentioned I provide snacks. We do the scavenger hunt. I have a sleep menu on the bedside table where I actually provide 3 different types of pillows, so soft, medium, and foam. But they wouldn't know that there are more pillow types in the closet if I didn't just leave a little sign that told them that these things are available to them. Those little touches that, I mean, the sign cost me nothing. It took me, 10 minutes to type something up and print it. But it's one of those things where I had a guest the other day message me and she wanted to know where I got my mattress, where I bought my sheets, where my pillows came from. She wanted a buy sheet, and then she left me a glowing review. And when she booked, she even said, I see in your reviews that people keep mentioning you have comfortable beds, and that's one of the most important things to us. So those, like I said, that's your branding long-term, is that review interaction. And it's hard to quantify some of that up front, but over time, when guests start giving you feedback and you get bookings from that feedback, you'll start to see that loop. The other side of those are great do's for furnishing. Don't clutter. A little bit of personalization is great. Plants are always great, but don't put tchotchkes and knickknacks all over the place. Don't fill your walls. find a balance. If you need help with finding the balance, I'm happy to help. But again, it feels intrusive when you're in someone's home and it's really personalized. It's also more to clean, and everything has to be dust-free every single time. So your cleaning costs are going to go up if you have more to clean. Don't overspend on furnishings. Buy good quality, but expect that it's going to get stained or torn or something eventually. And so, you're going to have to replace it, and find a nice balance, good, affordable pieces. Don't furnish with rare items or things that have a souvenir value. Like, I don't put a lot of Colorado specific little things like coasters or magnets that would give kind of that personality, but they very easily will go in someone's bag and disappear. And it's not the kind of thing that's worth fighting over. You're just going to be like, oh, that's the cost of doing business. That's my breakage for the month. So minimize those things that are adorable and would be awesome if people were honest all the time. So don't buy used mattresses, please. They're only like $300, $400, $500 for a nice king bed. And if you encase it and if you buy the ones I tell you to, they will last you a decade. Just don't do it. If you love scents, that's great. People are getting more and more sensitive to chemicals and heavy scents. So stay natural as much as you can. Don't use heavy perfume scents. Don't use plug-ins. If I walk into a space that smells like a plug-in, it tells me you haven't cleaned it properly or you're trying to hide some kind of problem. I should walk into a space and maybe a light essential oil diffuser, very light, if anything. But really, I want clean, lemon, pine, I want to smell cleaner, not chemical, but that's what I care about. I want it to be clean. Anything else, I have an essential oil bar with a diffuser where you can choose a scent that you like if you want to change what the aroma in the space. So then it's customized to you. It's not something that I've done. And that seems to be very popular as well. All right, so I'm almost done talking at you, I promise.
Tracy, is this a good time to just kind of scan and go through some of the questions that weren't answered? Or we have a couple more that have come in?
Give me 2 more slides and then we can do all the Q&A you like.
You got it. Thank you.
So again, this is just a wrap up of those things as a pro and con. We've already covered all this. So it's balanced. There are lots of pros, there are lots of cons. You just have to decide if the cons are something that you can live with, because they are different than being a landlord for tenants. And my takeaways really are just very simple. It can be a really fun, crazy adventure for you. And I find that a lot of people find that they have a passion for it. They had no idea how much they would enjoy it. I do also see some traditional investors who have been landlords for 20 years who do it for a year or two and absolutely hate it and sell their unit and move on. So it's not passive like regular tenancy. The operating costs are higher, but there, as you saw from my revenue and some of the like the market capitalization in Airbnb, there's a ton of money to be made as long as you're willing to spend the time and be a little flexible. So, all right, hit me. What you got?
Okay, I'm scanning through everything. Sheila Hatcher just wanted to, did you say that this potato is in the middle of nowhere?
It's in the middle of Idaho. Mm-hmm.
Idaho. And Elena said that you've been to 49 states. Which ones haven't you been to? Or which one, I guess?
Alaska.
Oh my gosh, Tracy, you should go. I love Alaska.
Yeah. I was, before the virus started in January, we were planning on selling this house and we were going to buy a duplex in Calgary. So I was planning on moving to Canada at the beginning of this year before the world changed. So I was planning to actually do the other side of the duplex would have been a short-term rental, and we would have probably then picked one up in Banff later once I got settled. So, but the world changes and you adapt.
Oh, nice. I've got a lot of cousins in Calgary. So if you start opening Airbnbs, let me know. I'll spread the word. I've got a big family.
Okay.
Hatcher said, do you think people would also rent a space way out in a rural area?
If you have, what's your buyer, your proposition? What's your guest experience? Since we're not selling the house here, we're converting the detached garage into a guest house out here in Pittsboro. And I'll probably target Raleigh, Durham, Cary, people who want to get out of town for the weekend. You know, I'm right down by Jordan Lake. There's all kinds of pottery and artist stuff down here, and tons of farm to table and small town vibe. But you just have to figure out what you're selling, what your brand is. And then, yes, absolutely. I mean, people are going to stand that potato. They'll go anywhere. You know, but knowing what you have to offer is the key. And if you aren't sure, I'm happy to tell you, or happy to look at it and go, this is what I would do. This is who I see you having an opportunity with. And it's going to be different for every single property. But rural is killing it right now because people want to get out of the city.
I think that the advice that you gave earlier, especially if you're going to be in an area where you're not so sure what the appetite is or what the take rate would be, is to make sure that you're looking at that long-term rental option and that the numbers work if you have to go that route. I thought that was really good advice. We also have, okay, you answered about the local manager, but how would you handle property management on properties in locations where there are no property management companies within 40 miles of the property?
I haven't had that happen yet. I would need an example. Without getting into a specific, I would say that it, again, depends on how much time you want to manage personally and how confident you are in your ability to do that. There are many co-hosts and hosting that offer remote services. So that's certainly something you can do. And then you would need to find at least one cleaning person, probably two, and a really great maintenance person that you trust implicitly, because they're going to be your people on the ground. And you would have to set up kind of a hybrid where you're managing some of what a typical local property manager would do. So you can do it. And lots of people do. I just find that their nightly rates and their reviews, I can tell when they're self-managing and they're not really, really experienced at it.
Great. Helena mentioned, so you had talked earlier about possibly putting in a property with a pool, and she's asking if wouldn't insurance be much higher if there's a pool?
Sure, but I'm sure it's not 30,000 more a year.
That is true. I do have a question about whether or not I can make these slides available. So Tracy, I don't know.
That's fine.
Okay, great. If you can, we'll work it out. You can get them to me and I can put them up on the website.
Sure.
Then Jill said, so you gave a lot of advice, but if you had to narrow it down, what are the things that you do that puts your properties in the 90th percentile? Maybe give us the.
So number one is my property manager, hands down. I can't give her enough credit. So I am an analyst at heart. I'm a numbers person. I have a lot of experience. I could probably do most of this myself, but for example, my property in her system, I have 3 cleaners on my house. It only takes 1 to clean, but she has double backups for my cleaner to handle sick kids, sick cleaners, whatever it is. Has never been a problem getting my house cleaned. I don't even hear about it. And if you're self-managing, that's going to be one of your biggest challenges, finding a great cleaner and keeping them. She had my primary cleaner this year. This fall, she had to start homeschooling her 4 kids. So she had to leave the company because she has 4 kids to homeschool. She can't do both. And that's one tip I will give you. If you're looking for cleaners, stay-at-home moms can be a really good option because typically you're going to have a mid-morning checkout and a late afternoon check-in. So mine is 10 to 4. They check out at 10, they check in at 4. I have 6 hours middle of the day, right when most moms have dropped their kids off at school and can get out and make some extra money and then pick the kids up in the afternoon. So that's often a good way to find a good cleaner for you. But you, again, want to have at least one backup. So she had to start homeschooling and had to leave. And I'm sure she didn't have much notice. It's eventually the way things have been going. School's probably told her a week before they're not coming back. So good luck with that. And it was never a problem because she has that system in place. So that is, the cleaning is the biggest thing. Other than that, dynamic software can be really helpful. And that's, again, something you want to look at if you're using a property manager. What dynamic software are they using? What pricing software? What calendar management software are they using? If they don't know what you're talking about, call me.
Tracy, are you a fan? Do you use Beyond Pricing? Are you a fan of Beyond?
Yeah. Yeah. Beyond Pricing is really good. Wheelhouse is popular too. I think Beyond Pricing gives you Beyond Pricing is my preference. I think it gives you a little bit more ability to customize than Wheelhouse, but they're both very good. Those are your two industry leaders. You'll hear Price Labs mentioned a lot too, and I think it's okay. I don't think it's as good as the other two, and I have heard of some integration issues with it. So those would be the ones I would look at from a pricing. So the reason you want to do dynamic pricing is because your listing will get better search results. So if on Airbnb, if you're doing dynamic pricing and you're using the system to change your prices, I mean, all the way out, 6 months out, every day. I mean, I get a report and we probably change 60 prices every single day. And it's a lot to do manually, but the software will do it for you. You just set up some rules. And the way Airbnb's algorithm reads that, it's one of the things anyway, is that you're constantly in your listing, keeping it active, keeping it updated, and that's what they want. So you get first page results, second page results. If you're past page 4, you're probably missing a lot of the bookings because someone's going to find something in those first couple of pages and book, and they're not even going to see you. So your search results and your cleaning team, really.
Excellent. I think I'm double checking, but I think I asked all of the questions that have come in.
Anybody else? Got 10 minutes. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate you listening to me talk at you about short-term rental. I love it. And again, if you're looking at a market and you'd like an analysis, that's something I can do. If you're looking at property managers, if you have a listing already and you'd like me to tell you how we could optimize it and make you a little bit more money, whatever it is, I love the challenge more than anything. And really the biggest reward to me is seeing the guest reviews at the end to know that we've made something really special and delivered on our promise.
Tracy, you are always just a wealth of information. We're getting lots of thank yous. I personally love how much you share, and I think that your presentations are always crisp and clean and so easy to follow. So for that, I thank you. Audrey, I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Yes, I enjoyed your presentation. Thank you. As someone who was on the fence for dabbling into short-term rentals, you kind of convinced me to kind of take that leap.
Well, listen, there's one thing you can do that I didn't really talk about. If you have space in your house, you can try hosting a room first. You know, decide that you've got a bedroom that you're willing to do, or maybe you have a mother-in-law suite that's detached, or like me, I won't do my personal space because my husband would kill me. But the detached garage is fair game. So, you know, you could even try and dabble in something that's a little closer to home, a little lower investment to really test the water and see if it's something that fits what you're interested in before you go all in like I have.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can tell you, I mean, I've got my first one up and running in New Bern, North Carolina. It's currently rented out actually to Harvard students for 4 months because Harvard went online. But and I love, you know, I enjoy flipping, but I'm loving the short-term rent. First of all, I love the revenue, but it's also it's just a very different experience, and it's one that I'm looking to rinse and repeat. So I'm a little hooked, and I'm a data person as well, Tracy. I mean, so I run the numbers every which way. There's something for everybody. Guys, thank you. Thank you so much for taking time out of your Thursday and for being so engaged and asking some fantastic questions. we'll get the slides, reach out, Tracy, I'll get the slides from you. And I did record it. Full disclaimer, you know, sometimes I get a little distracted. I hit the record button about 5 minutes in. So I didn't get the first 5 minutes, but I got the rest of the presentation, and we'll get it posted. So with that, keep an eye out for next week's meeting. Thanks for joining, and ta-ra.
Thank you,
Thanks, all.
guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.